Their imagination to its core. Understand how to modify this location setting. Becoming what you already are is knowing identifying who you are. Is the lines of screen lines and adaptation that you get in position lines of settings, crossing those bridges, how you see that lines of communication setting. The communication to its convergent system is confidence. And the levels that you reach is no levels of resistance. You really start how to see yourself beyond the system. I am the system. You are the system. But try to play it out through its own system. Try to identify that lines. Try to get in that locations. Try to understand how to see yourself without asking any questions of life itself. So if there's nothing to life and position, it's me against myself, or not understanding the self of me, or everything's against me, or everything's with me, or everything's not with me. Well, it's how you identify yourself, how you are talking to that settings, how you modify your system, how you communicate in all levels. This helps you identify your system to what you are in travel, okay, and how to use it through the mind of your own, how you come into your own commodities, how you see your own assets, your own datas, or how you come access to this, or how you come access to that. But you decide that. You make your choices and decisions. Is it very hard for you guys to be implanted in so many levels and set lines, knowing that you're not in control? I know what that feels like, and you realize, because you actually believe it, because you want to believe it, and you realize that there's nothing to believe, it's how you believe. There's nothing to see until you understand how you see, or how you perceive consciousness, and how you want this to come in, or how you say this to that person, or how you say that to that person, or how you say this to you, or how you say that to yourself. So there's always ways of looking at your systems to know exactly what's going on through calculations. So this helps you in position, all right? How to see yourself in all lines of set position. Seeing, going beyond, seeing your true essence of you, true resonance of you, true renaissance of you, how you see everything of a metaphor. A metaphor is all levels of space that's ongoing, that constant continuous flows through polarity that never stops running your system. What you have to start identifying is to see your body as a commodity, as in all levels, how you position your systems, how to come in that calculation setting, how to see yourself in the quantum sphere, how to see yourself in the quantum aspects of your system, how to see yourself as a vessel to communicate with, how to see what you want to see, how you identify. You are in that position, how you see everything of like. What is like? Okay? What is like? What is like? It's the levels of two frames. Like is the operation line sequence into Fibonacci line set location of travel. And K is kilo Mike, or 4 grounds of sequence location to 2 pyramids and 4 lines of calculation. 1 above, 1 below. And existing normal formations, 2 lines of settings, 1 set lines of service, 4 lines of travels, 4 line calculations of green locations. Like. How do you see like? So it's your imagination that sets it up. The mind is always setting things up, which is creation of creating all at once. So the polarity is how we see things in one setting, one frame, one traction, one locations. Now you have to understand how to modify this and how to understand how to see yourself through 0, 1 and quantum. Everything's quantum. Everything you touch is quantum. Everything line set location. You just have to understand how to alchemize everything and liquidize it. Take it out of carbon and see it disappear into thin air. And that's understanding how you come into your systems. You start to control the mechanism of yourself. You start understanding how to appreciate yourself more. You start to identify yourself. You start to see things differently. You start to recognize things. You start to smile more. You start to build your confidence. You know, you're like a wall. You're walking tall, you know. So there's a lot of ways you can see yourself in motivation. You can see yourself in so many levels, how you see your system as a computer of an operation. So let's get a triangulation of 3 centers, directing and set lines of course centers of calculation. 3 triangulation line can set in position, all sit in sequence location. Okay, on line centers on position of flux, 3 centers of travel over lines of set travels, point lines of graph, and position lines of calculation. Okay, in that sequence, make sure you calculate and modify. Set convergence lines of setting, flux over 3, set position over 6, over 9, over 12. Process indicate lines, position lines of 1.5 pipe, set course centers, 3 half pipes and lines of sequence location setting. Positive indication is moving forward and travel. Okay? Okay, so we change the flux line. Correlations travels. 1/6 lines on one measure, 1 over scale, 1 position lines on 1 position line calculation. Directing grounds of sequence, directing lines of pi. Okay? So that correlates the panels. Outside, inside lines of travel. Platforms over 1, E factors over line, course centers, interaction locations. Directing platform over line, times centers, time panel. Set 3 centers of calculation screen lines, adaptation lines of high centers, sync line course centers, circulatory line course centers, directing course centers and communicating positions, and 0, 1 is a travel communication. Okay? Now, I'm just setting up platforms for you to understand how they go and travel all at once. Now, alchemizing things is basically taking the line signal and basically changing the polarities of space lines of time frame, but you have to send a time lock. There's a time lock panel. That's a time replacement. So once you understand how to alchemize the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols, I'm going to show you how to get in position, how you bend space, lock space, freeze space, rewind space, and fast forward space. Time centers, time sequence, times pi. Clocking centers, the channels operationalize dimensional doors on sequence calculation. Ground centers, lines of sequence, platforms over lines, E factors over line, course centers, and configuration setting of travel. All in set position of motion. Okay, so come in that position lines of settings. Now, because everything is 0, 1, now we have to process these things. This gets more complicated with your CPU. Okay, set lines of units into PC. Now, PC is how you see your position of your settings. You can see it through policy. You can see it through any of the locations. You can see it through all lines of all communications. It's position programming, processing. It's all lines of position. CPU, it can be the computed system. It could be the program that you go through units. The equal line can be anything, location it travels. But everything is modified set position how it correlates the communication to its binary, to its argument location, to its system, to its encryption. So C correlations, set position line settings, 0, 0, 0, 1. Okay? And that's all through C. Now, this is just basic line settings. So we got a triangulation flux and center lines of anomaly. Okay, so now we have the P line centers. That's 1 equals lines of P. Okay, 1 equals lines of platform. Okay, now understand the correlation lines, division lines, set course centers, dimension lines of space. You have to understand how to coordinate and get into specifications how you're going to go line position all levels through 0 and 1. How you calculate and modify that, because you guys never lost signal of this. That puts you in position how you see it through jamming signals, data formation lines, ground standards lines, calculation lines, Voltrek location setting, Tango, Foxtrot, anything positional location, how you see the modification system, how to use yourself through competent setting into the processing into the data programs that you are, and unification setting into the placements that you are in levels, CPU of PL, dimensional sale. See, there's the sale. Okay, so that's just a basic understanding how you use that and how it comes in its own equally line course centers, alchemized boxing, frame course centers, triangulation over line, signal location setting, where you put the 0s and 1s of travel and set lines of communication. Okay, box frame triangulation location setting, right? Work together on all lines of sequence, all through clarity, all position, all through polarity, right? So that's just the basic grounds through 0s and 1s, guys. You guys are so used to using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're in 0, 1 and quantum. Now you have to understand how to alchemize things and liquidize it to your equities and your assets and come into your own communication, how you use your own commodities in your own systems. Okay, so that just gives you a basic standard through structuralized schematics. Okay? So change the lacing lines, correlations of communication, and convert the system through data, process set lines, betting lines of setting. And now you indicate position. Now we're still going to work with the CPU that process lines and betting, or C over traction. Now this is where you come into more levels, how you come into your provision cycles of your calculation setting. Now that gets all communications converted in the system, all through tractions. You come in line centers, indirect lines, how you see a level. So you can change the C in different lines of set position. Now you have digital keys. Now you can change the key line centers to screen lines, adaptation of 0, 1 over lines of flux over 3. 3 lines of 6 lines, position location 0, location lines of 1 over lines of 0, lines of 2. There's so many ways you can get position of 0. But your proficiencies, your accuracy, and your performance is now 0, 1. You just have to identify it in lines of the alphabetical system. So you get a position of A. A is not A. Okay, 0. Okay, equals A. Right, so it's 0A. Okay, it's 0B. 0C. That's where we are. So that is the oxidized setting. That's the oxygen location system, which you are in zero gravity. Now you process that how you see gravity or grounds. A line communicates from position location to a system, all through adaptation lines of processing. All right, so we got C lines, and we got P lines of platform, and we got P line center and processing, and levels of communication lines of grounds. So we got PPLC, right? PPLC. Okay, so that's the binary of coding correlation system. P is lines of 2 zeros. Calculation lines of O is 1 0. Point lines of 1, because it offlines the signals in line core centers of getting that communication position and balance. And C is the correlation lines of 3 zeros in traction. Okay? So I'm trying to get you to understand how 2 zeros comes in position, and then you set up lines of scales, dimension lines over 1, process over 2, 3 lines of signals, 4, 6, 8 lines, and 9 lines of measure and scale. Correlates and calculation screen locations. Inside flux of communication, high centers of communication. Formula through equation. Okay? Travels all together in a line setting. Okay? Your unification of your polarities is knowing how to go through that communication to its quantum chain. Let's go into pixelation lines of TV receptor lines in one graph. Let's go through Lason lines and convergence. Okay, different lines of signals, locations, all right? Wave and settings, all right? Working all together, right? So it doesn't matter how you see it. Lason lines and the TV receptor line, box frame correlation, track center correlations. Okay, so it's like, right? And we change the signals, all right? Change the graphs. All right, see that? Magnetic line, high center location, wave line, screen adaptation, all levels, extreme resonance. All right, so we got 13 lines of line centers, oxidized core centers, line position 0, 1. Equal lines core centers, direct line condition 0, 0. Cross lines position, point line triangulation of 0. Okay, now that's the altitude measure scale of communication. That's the longitude and latitude of degrees, north, east, west, and south. How we process that position location is how you say it location of graphs. So we're going to be in line centers because you're coming into 13 lines of scale that process the higher self location to your alchemy core centers, your assets and your liquidity location setting liquidization system to your systems. Okay, so we put the 0 over here, and the process lines over 0 over here in flux, 0 calculation of grounds, and 0 over here in corner line centers triangulation over cross line in set position, outside inside rotation. Okay, now, so we got a 0 line inside rotation and a portal of communication lines of grounds and high lines of sequence, the process lines of 3 centers of scale of communication, inside calculation. 2 receptor line, box frame, triangulation core centers, calculate, modify. Lace lines, change frames and position lines of high core centers, and 45 line split lines of anomaly, and rotation lines of grounds, on signal, on pi. So it converts the system all through electrical line calculation setting and position lines of TV receptor, inside contractions. Okay, then we come to lacing lines. Now we go through coloration lines of coloration into the matrix. 3 signals, lines of grounds, sonograph interference, 3 channels of operation, pixelation of grounds, operation line set location of travel. Okay, and then they change the time frame. Clocking centers line position TV's center location of channel operation. Then we go to the convergence system blue. It overrides its signals. Okay, let's go alpha channels, alpha waves. Then you can go through alpha beta. That's the balance core centers and location where higher self comes in convergence into its radio signals, location of its setting, off through channel operation. Sets position lines of wave line centers. Then you get into all communication voice line panel, that process lines of communication lines, 8 over setting, indicate voice panel and signal lines and line connection system, all through tone and communication and convergence. Inside calculation, all through traction, face recognition, right? Face recognition as a pattern recognition setting would process your system all through calculations. That's where you come into headed state, get into step proceeding, how you see your location setting, and process all through. Well, you got one ground center, one operation sequence, and line conditions all lines, set position over blue over lines of pi. That process indicate lines. Now if I add anything in mass and volume, now I'm changing time frame and pixelation lines of wires. That indicates overline cross line angles that cross the line screen locates the system adaptation. All right, change the channels of operation, right? But it formulates the mind of volume now, comes into the face of the facade. So you have to understand how to use the wire signatures, how it communicates the system to alchemize. Wires are settings all through travel. That's a lot of alchemize you have to do. So as you go through that line of sentence, you go through components. All right, you go inside the electrical wires. It's really interesting. You travel through it. That's where your body has to be all crystalline. Okay, and the position of settings inside the wires itself travels through, right? So, and then you go into the adaptation system of its highways and travel. Okay, traveling through one set position, one wire, and signature locations. Now, the coordinate line course centers is a webbing line centers that process your system, how you see the calculation setting. So we got web 0, we got web 1, web 2, web 3. Now, that line course centers change convergent system all through setting of 0 lines and 1 over the lines of factors over E factors over a screen. So it's going to get a lot more complicated because what you have to get in position lines, the point lines of graph, is setting up webbing systems to each line of the calculation. You correlate the panels, process lines, graphing screens, and line set locations inside travel. Create the webbing system outside position. 4 centers of calculation. All right, stops, proceed, location lines of settings, operation lines of sequence. All through pi, all through generations. Okay, set up propellers and location setting through lotus. Okay, and then create lines of energy line course centers, location and webbing system. Lights over lines, lights over dark, darks over light. Then you set the webbing line rotation around the system, around the travel, and calculation screen locations, right? So you work on to next lines, line signals, but look at the longitude and latitude when you go through a TV line set location of setting in position, right? You can't see it until you bring it in, right? But it's very powerful here you come in that position, going through electrical lines of wires. Creating a webbing system is extremely important to your data that processes your system to access to come your assets to basically put you in your liquidities and your positions, calculation, liquidizations, your alchemy eyes. You're processing your position location, you're turning everything into a webbing system, right? So it's kind of like taking a word frame and alchemizing it and liquefying it into its particles of its atoms. That's rotating its system, taking it out of carbon and put it into alloys, going into the silicon of 24-line cycle that lines a signal location, its wired signal location system, into the process of communication of past, present, future, tweaking the wires line core centers that puts a constellation system off the track, location, and balance. The balance over core center calculates lines, dimension lines, communication position that converts every location setting into confirmation. All through transitions, all through webbing. Okay? So it's very powerful what you guys are coming into, all through adaptations of 13 number lines, and set lines at 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, equalize, set position alchemize, triangulation over 0. Okay? So I'll show you exactly how we go through the string theory of that. So you get a true understanding how to the zeros and ones, all right? So traverse points, graphs, calculation, modify. How a computer goes into arrows of indication. Let's go in travel lines. Arrows of indication there, right? Okay, see it's traveling, right? Okay, so it doesn't matter where you go, it travels. Okay, it's traveling, right? Very fast, right? So once you put add zeros lines, it changes the flux. You get 0, 0, there's pi. Right, so it's rotating system, circulation, rotation lines of grounds. Okay, now you get line course centers, spectrum, low spectrum, medium line graph, course centers, location of a sim. Circular rotation lines, set lines of graph, positions, point graph, communications, ground centers, sequence, 3 centers of measure and scale of 0. Operation sequence, and position lines, time frame, time calculation system. Time adapts centers, location to its settings, its operation sequence, location of travel. Travel is all calculated, modifying travel communications all at once. Platforms over lines, platforms over sequence, constellation over line screens, adaptation of travels and location of an atom. There's the atom. There's an atom, boom, right? So, you gotta have to really understand what's going on now. Not only your body's alchemizing itself, the combination setting of 13 centers, that's where you come into 5 lines and 9. That set lines of sequence location of 6 lines and line connection of travel that modifies your system with polarity, location of female polarity, male polarity. Process location awareness over conscious location awareness that puts you in a position of balance. But your body itself is liquidizing everything, okay, to its assets, and it's crystallizing everything. So the 4 line centers, how do you turn to 4? How do you alchemize that? You understand the travel, right? 4 is traveling through the set position. 3 wires of indications, 4 centers of calculation. All right, so as you take that out, the 4 disintegrates out of its codification. Okay, and then eventually it just disappears. It's in lines of calculation. All right. So you're disintegrating it, right? You're taking out the 4 of the carbon, coming to silicone. That process lines out signal of 24 center scale. Okay. Sets course centers and convergence. Position lines settings, the calculation screen location, alpha wave, beta. Set lines of course centers, direct line, calculate line, center lines, travel point lines, graph, calculate screen location setting. Dissolving lines, disengage, engage lines, attach location to systems. Process lines of 48 frame. Then it comes into 72 and then to 144 platform. Okay, so that's how you alchemize a 4 in position and settings into liquidizations to your assets and crystalline. All right, so the 4 disappears on the 144 platform. So it changes everything in settings, guys. Once it disappears, your whole platform disappears. Okay, look at this. It disintegrates and disappears. Comes in all time frames all at once. Planes, no planes, all levels and locates the system, right? So everything around you starts alchemizing, and it just liquefies everything of no atmosphere, of all atmosphere. Processing through that, it's very powerful stuff. Interactions. Getting a direct link, process medications, mind wipe, living the cycles into its liquidity, to its assets, of its processing, location, setting, and travel. It's gone, but still there. It's gone. Boom. Right? So that's basically understand how 4 is gone, right? And now it just comes out of thin air. And that how to go through that is your 24 lines of pi. Now that's where you come into your act of random kindness. Act of random kindness. Okay. Now, how small it is, it doesn't matter. It's abundance coming to you. Let's go through clocking systems and settings. Okay, now we're going to go through set lines of travel, center operation of U. Okay, center operation of settings. Now we go through 3 signals, which is your flux, your peace sign, travels position all at once, all in calculation setting. So that's 3 convergent system, split lines of anomaly, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. That's 1 pile and position line, registration line, course centers, and position location of your systems. That's in your ledger, location, setting, travel. Okay? And to customize in your custodian, location, and treasury. Right? Now, what you have to start identifying is how to go through the position of its pi. Okay, splitting lines of anomaly. Each time it goes into sectors, vectors, and quadrants, you know exactly how to come into your assets of a commodity system. Okay? So it becomes more powerful when you start to understand the speed and the anomaly, how you come in acceleration. So let's say you got 1/3 graph. It gets shorter term, but it comes into a line set locations to a film strip, okay, above the system, right? So that's 1/3 line centered at process locations. 1 graph screens 1/3. Okay, that's 3/4, okay, of assets. Okay, that's coming to you into refund. Okay, so I'm just showing you how this works. And then you work with the panels, 2 panels, and then you work with the grounds, okay, in subposition. Okay, so it's knowing how to work with your 1/3 lines of pi that comes in all position location to its setting through its quantum interface that gets you in positions. All right, so let's say you got position lines of diamonds here, diamonds here, diamonds here, diamonds here, right? 3 diamonds there, right? All right, so that correlates to track centers, direct lines of grounds, set positional levels, flywheel, direction of time frame, and then you come into coins. There's the coins, right? And then you get into your block shares. Now, block shares are a lot more complicated because you're going into graph screens. Okay, these are your block shares. Okay, so it's kind of like you see yourself through your own simulator and actually see your treasury location system. Okay, now time frames when it comes in calculation of this, very powerful stuff in set position, right? So that's a pyramid and that's a pyramid, but you have 4 pyramids coming positions. Okay, through your equities and liquidities of your full access that you have in data that process your system. Okay, so it's like I said, it's like going around the wheel. Okay, very powerful stuff. So it's amazing how that's set up in your systems to your pyramids and travel. Okay, it's incredible. So once it goes fast and faster, it goes to a location spin that changes everything in your settings, that alchemizes everything and neutralizes everything, location setting to your quantum self of expanding. As it's expanding, it's going through its polarities of 6 and 9. So you're spinning through cycles and you're basically coming into a position location of circulation rotation, right? Coming to circulation, you cross the angles, circulation, rotation. Okay, so you're liquidizing everything into the quantum, right, of your higher self. And then the
I found this on
the higher you go, the more you understand what's going on, right? You spin in the systems, right? So it's a connected energy, a wheel that you go through all levels, and how you pick up that is all through processing, and understand that through your inventories or anything in that position, because you're creating through its anomaly now. Okay, so that's how it works, through its kinetic wheel. Okay, very powerful stuff. All right, it's incredible when you see it. Of this positions operation, face recognition. So it's incredible, absolutely amazing when you see it, and that's what you guys are coming into. Right. So what Zero was talking about, your higher self is alchemizing itself. It's turned into a lotus. It propels its own line, cosmic lines of its engine, comes into its own mind adaptation of its system, correlates, calculates lines to its own commodity, its own information panel. It comes into its own flywheel and 8 lines of central system. Now, there's 5 lines, 9 sequence, right? That sets lines, course centers, how you convert the system into set lines of 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 6, 0, 9, over flux, over lines, over pi, into 12 lines, into polarity. Now, that polarity correlates, communicates to its assets, that liquidizes everything, locates into your liquidities and location system, that down processes your settings into your correlation setting to your core deposits. Now, that neutralized core centers have a digital key that processes your system. Now you can use that key at any lines of sequence, but you have to change the convergence setting to time frame, because the positional location of your assets constantly changes the wheel, a spin. Okay, the spin just keeps going around and around, so it's like a clothesline. So it's important how you get everything in abundance, little by little, frame by frame, track by track. Okay, so it's important you understand how you come into that. Okay, don't have any expectation on any level, but when you get abundance in, appreciate that. You get abundance from everything. Little things, it's the little things, it's the specifics. Okay, so once you understand that, it's much easier to see it all through its clocking system, all through quantum. Okay, travel. Okay, very powerful when you see it, when it comes together. All right. Okay, so the faster you go, the more you get more announced, more modified, more directed lines, more respect. Everything around you, you get more calculated in your systems. You get a more direct link with everything in your settings, more operating. You become more of yourself. You start to identify everything around you. You become the system. You are the system. I am the system. And everything around your system just constantly changes everything in transitions. So in that triangulation, box, star direction, time frame, or time lock line centers, time sequence calculation times pi, time editing space, they all travel all together, right? All right, so you put the zeros around. Okay, we got a 0, I got a 0, 1, I get a 0, I get a 0, and I get a 0.1. Okay, that's what you guys are in position of. So you're not platform anymore of 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's out of the equation. Quantum atmosphere is 0, 1 now, 0, 2, and 0, 3, changing the whole social metric system. How a computer operates is sending through CPU. So it can understand its data, understand its modems, Wi-Fi, satellites, and where it's coming through its conversion system, and how to use it through its own settings. So it can start to alchemize its own self and liquidize its own system, right, through its Kelvin, or its echo, or anything line position location water containment chamber, or anything location your flux through flush. So how to process that in location with setting. All through travel, all through direction. See, that's all. See? This is traveling, but this is still. Okay, now they're moving, see? See? It's what you say to your mind is being specific, how you coordinate and how you communicate with the star makes a time sequence. I get 0, 1 lines, 0, 0, 0.1, right? Traveling all together, see? And now they telepathize their system in a triangulation of 3 centers and 4 lines of position lines of wave. Now they really, see? See that? See? They're still. Okay? Now, when you add zeros to it, hey, spin all at once. Because I'm adding the lines of sit lines of high time frame now. Puts all positions. So I got 4 zeros and tractions, right? Okay, see now they're all traveling all at once now, right? Before they were just still. So when you add the zeros and ones, you're speeding up. It's like how a computer operates, you know? Like the fact when it comes into all settings, let's get a box frames. Let's triangulate position of programming. Okay, calculate modified, Travis point lines of graph, set lines of sequence, and communication ground centers into computer game. How computer operates its systems through 0 and 1. Okay, to its quantum, all through tractions, all through locations. So I'm just going to go through Qbert. All right. So it's all different levels, how you go through your own platforms and set lines of E factors over screen, and adaptation settings, box frames over triangulation, all through calculation, right? So you got Qbert on the box frames, right? There's Qbert. Okay, there's Qbert there and set lines of calculation, right? So it goes from one box frame to next. So it's right? And it goes faster, faster, faster. It's modified system, all settings. So everything around its system starts to alchemize everything, liquidizes everything through equity in your assets. So you're turning your body into visibility. Living into the charter waves, living into the quantum atmosphere, looking into position locations, looking through the window, not at a window. You don't look through things until you identify yourself first. So what Qbert is doing is just creating different lines, line position location anomalies of creation of creating, right? But if it gets confused, it starts over again, right? It gets back on the box. So that's confusing through quantum interference, the quantum anything line set locations, how do you adapt the systems, how you see that lines of anything line signals. 0 position. Okay, let's go through trapping signals. Graph screens locations, 4 provisions of set travel, right? 0. So 0 over here, right? Okay, that position line's alpha equals beta equals, okay, 0. Okay, so that's alpha. Set position 0, A 0, 0 equals lines of A, B, A 0, Z, A, Z. See how you go in frequency higher lines of screen? So your voice just like zzz, zzz, zzz. So it's building higher structure and frequency of waves. Okay? And it's all in position your Schumann resonance. Okay? So the team in the units has to modify the higher self out of 1 frame and come into 0 frame, which is 0, 1 frame, which is no gravity now. Because you're not on your earth. You never were on your earth. But the higher self is here now. Okay? You are now in the atmospheres. Okay, you're not in the earth. You've never been on the earth. Circulation keeps you grounded, which is your crop circle. 4 lines of calls. This is calculation in your system, right? All through transaction, 3 centers, 3 travels, 3 direct lines of 4 centered sequence. Okay, so you're always tethered and attached to your Earth, but it's all through telepathy of sonar, right? And then a planet comes in, flies over here, detects your system, sonar, echo line, right? So XC1000 comes in, protects its planet. Okay, usually there's lines position of 3, 6, or 9, or 12. Okay, So it's very powerful. And when that comes in that position, if you don't identify yourself, I'm just going all over the place here. Understand the map line, set location systems, how you calculate, modify location, how you see your higher self, and identify the set locations. All right, so let's say next 2000, they're all communicate to all of you all at once. There's your telepathy, right? They're all connecting you all at once, right? So they create a web around your system so you can't go anywhere. Okay, so you're being sucked into their planet. Okay, so the webbing itself is like being caught in a web, and knowing exactly how to interlink your system location, your system that puts you in process and communication of your data, that gets you in position of its convergent system to all levels. How to understand yourself is how to see yourself through 13 higher line screens into alchemized core centers of gold, golden templates, golden tablets. Know how to modify in that position everything you touch turns to gold because you're alchemizing it, right? And this comes into your ancestor history and the location of celestials. Okay, so it's just very powerful when you come in that position all through travel, okay? All through webbing system, the higher self. So the higher self has identified the zeros and ones of itself now. How to understand how not to connect with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it's 0, 1, 0, 2, right? 0, 3. Start with that settings, right? And after you get in that position, you can go through 0, 1. Then you can go 1, 2, 3. But there always has to be 0. Okay? Always has to be 0. Now you can be 0, 1, or you can be 0.1, or you can be 0 _ 0. Okay? You just get used to it. It's the quantum way. Setting sequence, 4 grounds of set travel. There's the pyramid. Okay? Process cards, centers, lines, ionic core centers, directing inline communication on Egypt. Flux line, core centers, direct line, position on all levels. Toth comes in, like rotation lines of grounds, on center, on sequence, on pi. Triangulation line connects to setting. Process inside, outside line connects to its pyramid. Correlation and ground centers, line communicates positions, all through calculations. Okay? So it's knowing how to change the 0 1s into flux lines. So I can change 0, 1, downshift lines on Ami, point lines of 4. Now I can indicate that. I can process lines of 0, 0, 0, time jump, 0, 1, time jump, 0, 2. Okay? So you're processing yourself through toning. Knowing how to see that lines of set position, all lines, voice line grids. Right? So this is alpha, this is omega, okay, this is delta, okay, and this is theta. Okay, alpha tone, line position on travel, right? Correlations, calculation lines, screen lines, constellation, planetary line 1, planetary line 2, process of 4 lines of 6 over lines of measure. Constellation lines, operation sequence, clocking centers of communication lines of 0. So, and it all travels all together all at once, right? If it's not traveling, you have to go back. That means you're still in the story frame line. You can't alchemize. If you're doing this way, if you get in a 4 setting as sequence, and you're halfway there, okay, there's a 4, right? Still see the 4, right? Still see the 4, right? But 4 is never a 4. It's changing too fast, too quick. But it's already been alchemized. So I got 3 lines of flight right there. Okay, we got 2 track provision lines, sent lines of sequence right there, right? And then we have 2 grounds and 4 lines of flux. There's your pyramid right there, right? Then you fill in the lines of signals and graph communication. Okay? Okay, and then you basically opt the system, triangulation, comes in line, core sense, calculation setting. Okay? Modify that, set lines of grounds, on sequence, on communication, convert the system, all through travel, all through directions, set position, time frame, chart with core centers, equal line set, and calculation setting to your intelligence, face recognition. So there's no way that could be a 4. It could be anything it wants. 4 is always going to be a 4, but you have to understand how to not stay in the 4. Okay, it's a crossing set position locations where you start to recognize these things. So if you understand what 6 and 9 is, Okay, you understand the flight and the navigation system that processes indicates lines of travel, right? And not knowing exactly how it worked with the sick in a Fibonacci setting, that process indicates inside rotation in the center of operation lines of sequence. Okay, but you look at it this side, what is in travel communication? Right? So it's how you look at things at scale in your imagination and being specific. Okay, the roots, the routers, your systems, constellation, rotation, circulation. Okay? So your higher self is now being liquidized of its operation system, of its polarities. Coming into this, coming into this. Okay? So that's 4 lines of sequence, 4 lines of travel, 4 lines of directions, 4 locations. Okay? All circling all at once. Data, data, process, vessel. Okay? Travel through platforms, calculation here, setting operation line sequence, tubing centers, core centers calculation. Right? So it's known exactly how to use the earth line and rotation lines at set locations and setting the calculation. Right? And using the platforms as highways. Right? You can go in different directions in that position to its settings, all through traction. Okay? But you always see face recognition. Always, always, always a face recognition. So you stand preceding yourself that's protecting yourself from everything else. Right? There always, always has to be a face. Because it's you in the center, changing your systems. And how you coordinate that is alchemize every location setting. So clocking zeros. Okay, so now line center 0, 12. Now, it's up to this location. This is where it gets tricky. Okay, that's 0, 12 now, right? It's not 12 anymore. So you're no longer in this. Okay, you guys are no longer in this now anymore. Because it never existed. That's a half pipe. All right, so 7 lines, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, you're no longer this. But you are the center operation that never leaves, right? So you understand how to use 0, 1. It's tricky now because the pi is going faster. Lines like quantum lines, axis locations. All right, so process lines, set locations. 0 comes over here. Okay, you travel through it, right? So you're time leaping, you're time jumping, and you're vortexing, right? So you don't add a 0, 1 there because it's already there already. All you're setting is a graph screen. So you coordinate it through that line position of its quantum system, so it alchemizes right away. You can change anything through flux, anything through time, anything through scale, anything through travel. Okay, so from there, in that position, all right, location, then you go to lines. Okay, that position lines is settings, that process course calculation screen locations. Then that process line connection setting of 0, 2. Right, so you can change line position of 2 into 0, 2. Right, but you have to travel through it. So that's the quantum change of clocking, which changes the times of scale. It changes your parallels. It changes your paradigms, your polar shifts, how you time your sequence lines of calculation. Circulation and rotation. Okay, circulation and rotation. There's the atom. So now, what you guys have to understand, in that position location, every atom, every cell, every modification of its information bits is now alchemizing its set location to its setting to its gold template that liquidizes its location setting to its equalization system, which is particleizing your settings into more soul regeneration settings, making you guys younger in space of time and time of space. How you convert that position of polarity is 8 lines of signals. So we process lines of 9 line centers of 3 centers, sets over lines equals lines of 2 over 9s, set course centers of 8, process lines of 8, process lines of 8, 8 lines of position, pillars over 1 over flux, north line east, set lines east line west, west lines of south, south line east lines north, north east west south. Says communicates position, author operation. Trait lines, course centers, and position lines, gigabytes, correlation centers, gigawatts, course centers, calculations, screen location, right? It's all lines of travel, okay? So that's all it is, right? So everything in your body is liquidizing. Okay, now the 0 line operation line signals, it's an information bit. That's where your cells communicate with each other. It's an information panel through your commodities. Understand how to see that through data processing that gets you into data programming. To your programmers that you are in position, that puts you in locations how to use that to your systems. All right, so let's say you got identification of cell. Each cell in your body has its own power cell, position, location, identification code lines, identification line centers. Now it's 3 lines of signals. Always starts at 3 because it cross lines into the female, okay, in process location lines to its polarity. Okay, so that's position lines of grounds. So female line, course centers, polarity line and rotations, equal lines of the Earth. That equilibrium balances out the polarity, location system, and travel. And then you come into the 4 centers, which is the male polarity. Okay, it's that position. Now, how you see that through coordinations, you can do anything in flux, anything in truth, or anything in false narrative, right? So there's a lot of things you have to understand how to go into the betting system through its operation setting, all through platform, and all communication to its cycle. Understand ground lines and set course centers, line course centers, direct location system, computing line centers, operation line sequence, 2 zeros and tractions, 3 lines of flux, dimensional sail, solar sail, travel. Okay? So all you're doing is just adding line signals and creating a connections. The zeros and ones are coming into creating its own lotus to its own position lines of setting, propeller its own set location, constellation to its own line connects to its convergent system, a self-propelling engine, that process communication system, turning you guys into a flower recognition, a trowel, okay, that propels your engine off the triangulation. Okay, speeding lines, anomaly, location, setting, edge calculation. Okay, the flower of life. The flower of life is how we see 6 to 9, which is 3, 6, 9, right? But everything around you is not a straight line. So we're alchemizing everything, liquidizing everything, all position locations, all through quantum. Now you just have to stand go through the quantum chain and 0, 1, and 0, 2, and 0, 3, back to line position of 0. 0 is always in the beginning, which is no beginning. Flux lines, screen lines, adaptation process, 4 indication lines of 4 centers of sequence, all through its compass and all through travel. Okay, time measuring scales, operation sequence, location propels the engine, rotation setting, all through pi. Process calculation setting, strip lines anomaly, course sense calculation lines, sonar, sonograph interference, white over dark. It's that position of its operation. Okay. It's really good when you get into sonar, then you get in location of Tango Tango Foxtrot, and you get to understand how to go through that line settings. So it's a convergent system through 12 centers of pi. You have to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. 12 pi's you have to go through, which is your strands of your set position. Okay, 12 planets. Aligning in all lines of course centers of communication lines of travel. Directing inset lines, outside line communication with setting, truth lines of false narrative lines of truth, line course centers, location with systems, off the calculation. Converts the system all through settings. Runway, okay, in travel. Okay, so each planet has the rotated system, alchemized settings, liquidation setting, all assets, data, access, line screen, all process, habitation, in and out lines, course centers of calculation. Okay, so it converts all lines of angles, all calculate and modify. Turning you guys into a configuration of its setting. You. So all the Earths turn into you. Alchemize your systems. Comes into gold plates. The process indicates the setting, how you get in that course centers and directions of grounds, powers, and tubing lines of screen adaptations of flux. Okay? So it's very powerful what you guys are coming into. Through alchemizations, all through calculation setting. Your liquidity is basically understanding the acceleration lines of Mach, how you process your system location convergence, and know exactly how to use your data, your access location systems, get you in more lines of positions, right? But starting off with the lines of zeros and ones, how you come in your own surfacing engine of your own constellation setting and processing. Okay? So you shape yourself in line settings of atoms, molecules, protons, electrons, neutrons, and photons now. Okay, so, but your higher self has to be liquidized through its assets, through its speed, through its barometers, and location of barometers and thermometers. That's what keeps it flux. That's what keeps it balanced, and its temperature readings. Okay, so it's a constantly, it's an N lines of set position, opt line, centered location, opposite location setting, data process line communications convergence that gets in communication through its setting through codifications, right? So the higher self starts to build an inventory. Starts at 01 to 012. Once you get that position locations and settings, then it goes in positions all levels, a triangulation. Okay, so that 012 goes here at the bottom. Okay, and the 01 starts at the top, and you go around again, 02 and 03, 06, and 09, right? It's how you go through your clocking system, right? So your clocking system can be anything, okay? But the higher self has to truly understand itself first, okay? It has to really get in its perceiving through its consciousness and use its mind of state of where it is specifically, how it comes in its own system, its own operation, its own calculations, right? How it sees its clocking. Clocking could just be 01. Who says that there has to be a 12? Who says there has to be a 6? I say there's 01 at clocking. Now, if I want to add 02, there's 02 there. Now I can add 02 inside, but I can also add 02 outside, which is the truth and the false of its narrative. I state what it is because I'm being specific. I'm my own system. I'm my own operation. How I do my constellations and how I do my rotation has to do with me. Nothing to do with you, but you're being specific. And how you come into your own settings, how you see yourself in your own truth and your false narratives, how you see your inner space and your outer space, your inner spectrum, your outer spectrum of yourselves, how you see 01, not how anybody else. But they have to come into the quantum sphere. They have to come into the quantum chain. They have to come into the quantum flux to identify how they have to keep themselves more grounded now because they've never been on the earth. You've always been levitating. It's getting off the earth. It's getting out of the density and the toxicity that never exists in your system. So that's where you become above the system. That's where you become beyond the system. That's how you are the system. I am the system. And that's how it all works in modifications. Okay? Through the quantum atmospheres. Okay? Through quantum calculations of its quantum chain. Okay? So that identifies your systems that inlines of calculation screen locations will be in the constellation level C. Okay? Coliseum A. Coliseum A. Right? Adios.